The month of June is known around the world as Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, and Transgender Pride Month. Those of us who live in New York City benefit from a month's worth of rallies, parties, seminars, events, and of course, marches. While each borough has its own celebrations, the march, which takes place in Manhattan on the afternoon of the last Sunday of the month, is the event which really gets all the attention. This particular march is in memory of the Stonewall riots, which took place on Saturday, June 28, 1969, and which many consider to be the turning point in the history of the gay rights movement. While last year we celebrated the 50th anniversary of the Stonewall riots, this year marks the 50th year anniversary of the first Gay Pride March, which took place on Sunday, June 28, 1970. Also of note, this is the 50th year anniversary of the passing of a resolution at the Unitarian Universalist Association's General Assembly, which supported an end to discrimination against gay and bisexual people, as well as calling on congregations to develop sex education programs which promote healthy attitudes toward diverse forms of sexuality. Even beyond these anniversaries, this year we can celebrate how the Supreme Court ruled that the 1964 Civil Rights Act makes it illegal for employers to discriminate against an employee based on that person's sexual orientation or gender identity. These things, in and of themselves, are monumental anniversaries to celebrate. And yet I acknowledge that it comes at a time when there are so many other things in our collective lives which feel just as pressing. You don't need me to remind you that we are still in the midst of a global pandemic due to the novel coronavirus, as well as there being record high unemployment and a renewed awareness of racial injustice and police brutality. And don't forget, it's a presidential election year, of course. While New York City's official Pride March was canceled due to the pandemic, the truth is that Pride still persists, in the same way that church still persists, even if we aren't meeting in our buildings. And not just that. The truth is that the conditions and circumstances of the first Pride March 50 years ago are still relevant and have a lot to teach us about the present moment too. So, a bit of a history lesson. Before the first Gay Pride March and before the Stonewall riots, there existed in our country small pockets of resistance and activism for the rights of sexual minorities. For example, in 1965, what was known as the East Coast Homophile Organization, or ECHO for its initials, began holding what they called annual reminder marches in Philadelphia each 4th of July. These were silent, somber vigils where a small group of gays and lesbians marched in front of Liberty Hall, holding signs asking for equal opportunity, dignity, and to be treated and respected as individuals. In these formal and polite protests, the men wore jackets and ties, and the women wore dresses in order to seem less threatening to the mainstream public. Half a decade after the first Reminder March, in order to commemorate the first anniversary of the Stonewall riots, ECHO approved moving the 1970 march to New York City for the last weekend in June. Craig Rodwell, who started the annual Reminder Marches, was the catalyst behind the move. As a veteran activist, Rodwell had started the Oscar Wilde Memorial Bookshop in 1967 in Greenwich Village in order to create a visible public space for gays and lesbians. That bookstore would remain in business until as recently as 2009. Rodwell had also participated in the 1966 sit-in at Greenwich Village's Julius Bar in order to protest the New York State Liquor Authority's ban on serving homosexuals. After organizing the New York involvement in the annual Reminder Marches for several years, Rodwell spearheaded the committee to plan the new march in New York City. The new march was called the Christopher Street Liberation Day March, to move attention away from the mafia-controlled Stonewall Inn and onto the gay and lesbian struggle for liberation happening in the streets. Besides the march planned for New York, committees in Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Chicago also planned concurrent marches. Despite widespread fear of police obstruction and public violence, New York City's first Pride March went on. Initially, it just started with a few hundred people gathering downtown in front of the Stonewall Inn. However, as the march proceeded uptown along 6th Avenue for 50 blocks to Central Park for what was called the Gay Be-In, more and more people joined in. All of New York City's gay and lesbian groups participated, both the new generation and established veterans, as well as visitors, and the march attracted national media attention. The organizers of the march disagreed on what to chant while marching. However, they finally settled on a chant that went, "Say it clear, say it loud, gay is good, gay is proud." Activist Craig Schoonmaker was the one who was responsible for suggesting the use of the word pride rather than gay power. In a recent online interview, he explained, quote, "There's very little chance for people in the world to have power. People did not have power then. Even now, we only have some. But anyone can have pride in themselves, and that would make them happier as people and produce the movement likely to produce change," end quote. While rallying in the park, the demonstrators made their political needs known by protesting laws that made homosexual acts between consenting adults illegal and social conditions that often made it impossible for them to safely display affection in public, maintain employment, or rent apartments. One activist present at that first march told a reporter that, "We have to come out into the open and stop being ashamed, or else people will go on treating us as freaks. This march is an affirmation and declaration of our new pride." Another activist commented that, "We're becoming militant and won't be harassed and degraded anymore." While another activist noted that, "The main thing we have to understand is that we're different, but we're not inferior." Yet another activist noted with irony that the same tactical division of the NYPD, which had been active in the Stonewall riots, was there at the march, albeit at the end of the parade, to protect the marchers from violence. When all was said and done, the more than 2,000 activists, revelers, and proud people who joined in that first march transformed American public discussion of homosexuality that day, simply by being themselves as they walked together uptown. And oh, has that public discussion changed in 50 years. Just within the past 12 months alone, gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender people have gained attention for their positive contributions to American life. Consider, for example, Mayor Pete Buttigieg, a multilingual Rhodes Scholar and Army veteran married to his husband, who made history by becoming the first openly gay person to launch a major presidential campaign. Or consider Marsha P. Johnson, a gay liberation activist and self-described drag queen who, though she died in 1992 under mysterious circumstances, was honored by our governor, who renamed Brooklyn's East River State Park after her in February for her key role in the Stonewall riots and her tireless activism thereafter for homeless transgender people. Consider too Christian Cooper, who became well known last month due to the Central Park birdwatching incident. While many know him for the recording he made of the racially charged verbal confrontation another parkgoer had with him, what many might not know is that Cooper was the first openly gay writer and editor at Marvel Comics. And while there, he created the first openly gay character on Star Trek, and he created the first openly lesbian character for Marvel. In addition, consider DeRay McKesson, an openly gay activist who's gotten a fair bit of media attention lately thanks to his involvement in Black Lives Matter, and also for his involvement in Campaign Zero, an American police reform campaign which advocates for changes such as establishing effective community oversight of the police, banning chokeholds and strangleholds, requiring de-escalation, requiring a warning before shooting, and demilitarizing local police departments, among other reforms. In each of these examples I've shared, I see the legacy of that first gay liberation march living on, shining through in these people I've mentioned and in many more too. People who embody the goal of equal opportunity and dignity for themselves and the wider community. The GLBT community, which claims these people as its own, also has a lot to teach the wider community. As I've mentioned, the Stonewall riots began as a response to ongoing police brutality and intimidation, and the community has long had an internal debate about the proper role of law enforcement, ranging from banning uniformed police presence at pride marches in some places to, on the other hand, celebrating the accomplishments of openly GLBT police officers, captains, and chiefs. Also, this community's longstanding fight against a lethal virus, HIV, which still has no cure or vaccine, shows the tenacity of a people who've had to learn to live and love in the face of the threat of viral exposure for decades, and reminds us that our current pandemic is one in a long line of pathogens which have used humans as hosts and which is best fought with compassion, the expertise of science, and a balance between eagerness and patience. And so on this 50th anniversary of the first Pride March in our country, we Unitarian Universalists, who have also been at the forefront of the religious community for the past 50 years to promote acceptance of others based on our common human values, we too today can look at our past to find hope for the future. We see that while history seems cyclical more than linear at times, that we have helped usher in a world where, as this year's official Pride theme proclaims, the future is full of pride. Pride in being game changers, rule breakers, and go-getters. Pride in how we self-define and being the change we want to see in the world. Pride in celebrating our past revolutionaries who helped change the narrative. Pride in equal rights. Pride in choosing how we want to be in the world and in showing up as we want to be seen by others. And pride in a future which is ours to define. The future is pride, and we here today through our presence and celebration have already contributed to that next chapter of an as yet unwritten narrative. Thank you.